So let's jump right first into it. Let's talk about some games that I thought were a little bit intriguing for me, and I wanted to share my thoughts and some notes that I saw throughout the weekend. So first things first, I want to start with the Colts and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, a lot transpired throughout this game. Obviously, Anthony Richardson went down. Joe Flacco steps in. The Pittsburgh Steelers defense looked a little mortal, I guess, per se. But we'll start with the Colts. Number one, they have an issue, I think, with the quarterback position. Now, it's unclear whether or not Anthony Richardson is going to play this next week. But if that's the case, that's okay if he doesn't, because I think Joe Flacco is more than capable. We know what he can do, especially as a backup. We saw what he did last year over there for the Cleveland Browns. I think he can do so here in Indianapolis. Now, I thought this offense looked pretty good. He raised the level of Michael Pittman Jr., who had kind of been forgotten a little bit in this offense the first couple of weeks, but he turned around and had himself a really good performance this past weekend. Trey Sermon kind of got in the mix there a little bit. But what I do like with Joe Flacco, he brings a veteran presence into this huddle, and he knows how to get the ball out. And of course, he has so much experience playing the Pittsburgh Steelers. He knows exactly what they're going to do. So honestly, it's almost like he had the answers to the test when he got the call to go into the game to replace the injured Anthony Richardson. Now, looking at Anthony Richardson, I'll say this: I had a lot of support for him going into this year, right? It's kind of like his de facto rookie season because he missed a lot of time last year because of the injury. I think it was a shoulder. Now it looks like it's his hip. I don't know if he's going to miss any time. But one thing I'll say is that he's been really inconsistent so far this year. Can't hit the side of a building, honestly, for those close passes, and he's injury prone. So if you're the Colts organization, you have to start looking at this as some type of, it's a problem. If there's smoke, there's usually fire. So is it a bad thing that Joe Flacco continues to start? Probably not, but in regards to, well, we did give up, or we did spend a high draft pick on this guy. We want to see it pan out. Of course, I get that too, but I don't know, man. I really don't know. But at the end of the day, they got the win. That's what matters. But they have some decisions to make, especially if Anthony Richardson continues to get hurt and also plays inconsistent. And if Joe Flacco comes in and starts to ball out, we may have a quarterback controversy in Indianapolis. So, all right. On the other end, Pittsburgh Steelers, they are not undefeated anymore as they took the loss here in Indianapolis, against those Colts. The Colts exploited this defense. Not only did they exploit them, they really converted at a high rate on third down, which is something we really haven't seen a lot this year. The Pittsburgh Steelers defense is really good at getting off the field on third down. I believe the Colts converted about 53% of their third down conversions. So I'll say this: that defense did not show up for them this past week. At least the Steelers defense didn't. So, which is a little surprising because that's where they hang their hat on, unfortunately. You know what I mean? But especially because the offense is a little inconsistent. And now that we're talking about the offense, let's talk a little bit about Justin Fields. Solid game, really good game. But let's just throw this out there. He is QB1 for the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's no questioning that anymore. He is the guy there. So we'll leave that we'll leave that alone. However, though, he'll make a really good play and then have a bad play. He had a fumble, then he throws the big bomb to George Pickens. He did lead this team to come back. Obviously, he rushed for 2 touchdowns. I believe he threw for 1. Solid game. Moving forward, is he going to be the answer for them? I think he's a bridge until maybe at some point they go in and get a franchise quarterback. A lot of people say, well, Ryan, he's still pretty young. Not a lot of wear and tear on the tires there, but I think he is what he is. I don't think he's going to be anything more than what we see now from him at this point. So I'll just leave it up at that. And if this team is going to have any success, you can't put everything on the defense. They're going to have to be able to run the football effectively and still ask Justin Fields to make a throw or two down the stretch of games and make those plays, kind of like what we see Mahomes do. Maybe he's not perfect throughout the game, but there's moments in those games where you see Mahomes take over and he has a Mahomes moment. Justin Fields is going to be asked to do that at some point. Will he be able to do that consistently enough? We'll have to see how it plays out on the field. Okay. All right. Moving right along, I want to talk about the Broncos and the Jets game. A lot of thoughts on this one. We'll start with the Broncos here first. Offensively, man, what doesn't look good. Now, I get it. The weather conditions were not the best this past Sunday against the Jets, Bo Nix, man, he's really struggling. It's crazy that they won this game. If my memory serves correct, I think this brother, he completed a pass longer than 2 yards. It was his first pass completion over 2 yards in the second half. So he went the whole first half without not completing a pass for more than 2 yards, and they still won this game. Sean Payton's gonna have to figure it out. I don't understand. They got some talent right there. I mean, Courtland Sutton has been he's been in the league a while. He's a pretty sturdy, solid wide receiver option. They're gonna have to figure some things out because this offense that they got going, it ain't gonna be enough. One thing that did help them on Sunday was the improved running game. The Broncos did convert a lot on third downs by the help of that running game. So maybe that's always been my thought process with them, even going back to last year, is that they have to run the ball effectively in order to get the quarterback comfortable and going. If you can't do that, they're going to be dead in the water. So if they can continue to make strides to improve that running game, make sure it's strong, they run the ball enough to be balanced and keep teams on their toes, they may have a chance, because Bo Nix is going to have to play better. He can't just run around being an athlete out there in the National Football League. It just doesn't pan out that way. But at the end of the day, the defense is the star of this particular team. They are keeping this team above water. It's really 2 good, strong wins on the road in Tampa, and then you go to New York or New Jersey, wherever the hell the Jets play in MetLife, and beat them. So, really good, but the defense really, really is carrying this team to a point where it's kind of like, well, look, Bo Nix doesn't have to throw for more than 2 yards in the first half, and they'll still win a football game. So shout out to them. And I mean, like I talked about a little bit with the passing game and some of the receiver production. I mean, Courtland Sutton is definitely a guy. I think he's definitely had meaningful value in this league, right? He's had some injuries that plagued him the last couple of years, but I really feel like the concerns from the receiving core just it ties to the quarterback play. So if Bo Nix can get things going, figure it out, him and Sean Payton, maybe they can simplify it a little bit more. Maybe they can get their receivers more involved, and that'll help kind of complement what their defense is doing, because this defense is legit right now, as we're seeing. Now, let's switch gears and talk about the Jets and their offensive woes. Listen, there's a lot of problems when you really think about this Jets team, right? And the chemistry and the breakup of it. So, or the makeup, excuse me. Aaron Rodgers is theoretically the de facto offensive coordinator. Now, Nathaniel Hackett is there only because Aaron Rodgers wants him to be there. But you can't tell me that they're sending in plays and Aaron Rodgers isn't switching it up. Now, a big thing that I noticed this past week was that they did not run the ball effectively enough, especially in those weather conditions. Aaron Rodgers was back there just throwing when they probably should have ran, when you got guys like Breece Hall, a young up-and-comer, and Braylon Allen. So run the football, right? And then you got the head coach, who really is a lame duck head coach, in my opinion, because he is really at the mercy of Aaron Rodgers and what Aaron Rodgers will do for this team. So I think a lot of the offensive struggles stems with the play calling or the lack of play calling, because I feel like Aaron Rodgers just calls the shots. And where the hell is Garrett Wilson? Where has he been? Other than wearing those atrocious sleeved jerseys, where has he been? I was led to believe that he was a top dog in regards to wide receivers in the National Football League. Really haven't seen much of him. So, and you can tell that there's some frustration brewing between him and Aaron Rodgers, because there was a play, I believe it was a third down late in that game, where he expected Garrett to be somewhere. He threw the ball there. He wasn't there. And you can see Aaron Rodgers' hands go up. And we all know Aaron Rodgers, he's quite a showman, quite the diva. And you can tell his frustration with the wide receiver is evident. So, and on top of that too, discipline. All the penalties that they racked up. Some of these penalties were drive killers, or helped extend drives for the other team, who wasn't really playing well offensively anyway. So I don't know with the Jets, man. It's still early. The AFC East is still viable in a sense. I still think the Bills are the team there, even though they just coming off of a loss. But we see what the Dolphins are doing, and the Patriots as well. So they have a chance to maybe win a wild card out of all this, is when it's all said and done. But offensively, they're going to have to pick it up. I mean, because listen, a lot of people were like, "Oh yeah, they got right against the Patriots," but come on, man, a lot of teams are getting right against the Patriots. I don't care how good their defense is. They're going to have to perform on the offensive side of things, especially when you have a guy like Aaron Rodgers. So I'll just leave it at that. Okay, let's talk about the Chiefs. Now, Rashee Rice probably done for the rest of the year. I think he's done for the year. Torn ACL, MCL, one of the two. Now you've lost Pacheco for quite some time. Now you got Rice. What's going to happen here now? Hollywood Brown out for the year, if I'm not mistaken, too. They added him in a free agency. This team at the beginning of the year, we thought that they were just going to be explosive, right? And now their explosiveness is gone. So they have to rely on Travis Kelce, who I talked about last week on my NFL Sunday Wake Up Show. Like, he's going to have to get going because who else is out there? They signed Juju Smith-Schuster. Xavier Worthy is going to have to step up big time and be that guy and take the top off the defense. They signed Kareem Hunt, who had a pretty solid game this past weekend. But definitely guys are going to have to step up. So their depth is going to be challenged whatsoever the next couple weeks because they need it. They're going to need Kelce to follow up this trend that he had this past weekend and continue going because they can't afford that. But the only thing that's keeping them ahead is Patrick Mahomes. If they were without Patrick Mahomes, this team would be cooked. But because they still have Patrick Mahomes, they still have a chance. I'm not going to count them out because they are the defending champs. And every time we do try to count them out, they find some way to keep winning. This is one team that they know how to win football games. Period. That's it. It doesn't matter the style. It doesn't matter what they do. What they do best is, though, they slow everything down and they just breathe and they figure out, how can we attack you? How can we make plays? And that's exactly what they do with Mahomes back there at the helm. So am I worried about this team? Not so much, just because of what I just mentioned before. But their depth is definitely going to be at push to the brink as these guys are being injured, and hopefully they can get some guys back here off the IR in the next couple of weeks. Okay. Now the Chargers, on the other hand, blew a 10-0 lead. There were some struggles with the quarterback. His mobility is not great. He's back there limping around, and I'm talking about Justin Herbert there. And mobility is part of his game, right? You know, he's not Lamar Jackson, of course. He's not going to run off and sprint down the field, but Justin Herbert is a pretty mobile quarterback, and if that continues to be an issue with his ankle, that's going to be a problem. So they're going to have to rely more on the running game, which I think that's what they want to do anyway with Jim Harbaugh at the helm. Shout out to the defense, though. I think they did a good job overall, kind of corralling the Chiefs' offense, even though that they were down some guys. But still, I think the Chargers are still in a good position. It's a tough divisional loss. Don't get me wrong. But because they have guys like Jim Harbaugh at the helm, this team is going to be able to bounce back. But it's all going to boil down to health, and that's always what it comes down to with it. It seems like with the Chargers is health. So we'll leave it there. The next game, which was a big Sunday night matchup between the Ravens and the Buffalo Bills, this was a complete game, defense and offensively. I think they are starting to figure out what they need to do in regards to the offense. A little mixture of Derrick Henry with Lamar Jackson. That's a prime recipe for success for this team, right? When you're chasing Lamar Jackson all game and then late in the fourth quarter, you got to tackle this 250-pound behemoth and Derrick Henry. Some guys are not going to want to get off blocks for sure and make those tackles. So I really like that. They don't need to throw the ball that efficiently unless they get behind in some games, which it could be a possibility. But if they're playing from ahead, which more likely a lot of times they are, man, they can close out games. And having a guy like Lamar Jackson, who is an efficient runner as a quarterback, and then having Derrick Henry too as one of the all-time greats in rushing, it definitely bolsters your case for this team being a legitimate Super Bowl contender. Now, I know they had a rough start 0-2, but they've bounced back against the Cowboys and then against the Bills. And now they're sitting at 2-2 going into this weekend's matchup. So another thing, too, the pass rush was really good. They got after Josh Allen, Kyle Van Noy, who's been around. He's really doing his thing. I believe he forced a fumble in the second half of that game. So really good for him. And look, listen, the AFC is still wide open, man. I mean, there's the Chiefs. Texans, I think they're coming down a little bit. Still a good team. The Ravens just got themselves right back in this game. When I say the game, I feel like the game of the AFC. So, so shout out to them. Really, I mean, they did a good job. They didn't panic when they were down 0-2. They just kind of figured it out, and I think that's going to be the blueprint for them moving forward. Now, you look at the Buffalo Bills, on the other hand, is it time to worry? It happens. Sometimes you get your clocks cleaned in the National Football League. So, it was a disastrous night. It really was. I think all facets of their team just struggled offensively, defensively, and they just couldn't stop the avalanche of momentum that the Ravens had. I think the Ravens just kept building and building and building and building. And every now and then Josh Allen will make a play where you're like, okay. And I thought that was going to happen in the second half. I believe it was the second half where they came out and it was their first drive in the second. They went out and got a touchdown to Keon Coleman. And I thought, okay, well, at that point they were still in striking distance, but in the end, the Ravens just really overwhelmed them. And they just couldn't get off the field when they needed to, and the Bills suffered their first loss of the season. But I'm not all worried with them so much. I know they have a big matchup this weekend again, but I'm not worried about them. I still think they're one of the better teams in the AFC, and they're going to drop a game or two here. I mean, it's a long season. It's not college football. You're not playing, FCS schools. You're playing grown men, so it's going to happen. It's definitely going to happen. Now, I mean, listen, they come off beating the crap out of Jacksonville, and then the next week they get their wig split. So this is how it goes when you play football. I mean, at the end of the day. So, but overall, I'm okay with what they got ahead of them. So we'll have to wait and see with that. So.